Hey guys, welcome back to the Author Spotlight series brought to you by Non-Fungible Book Club. For episode 3, we are going to get a chance to meet with a man by the name of Michael Hollomon, the author of Satoshi's Gift, the past, present, and future of Bitcoin. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't own any Bitcoin myself, but it's something that, as someone who's been in blockchain and crypto, it's always been in the back of my mind, right? How do I get some of this Bitcoin everyone's going crazy about and talking about? And I have no idea where to begin. And I think a lot of you are probably in the same boat. Well, fortunately for us, we have the author of Satoshi's Gift who's going to join us right now. Michael, without further ado, really appreciate you for joining me here. Got a chance to read your book. Really excited for more people to get a chance to read it and learn about Bitcoin and maybe find out why you're so crazy about it. But before we get into the book and Bitcoin itself, I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself and give the people a little bit of a background about, how you've gotten to this point.
Well, thanks, Paul. First, I just want to say thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be on the NFBC platform. It's a phenomenal, I think, service and product that's being offered. I'm glad to be one of the earliest books on there. About my background, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law here in California for over 35 years. I don't really have any special training or education in computer science or economics, although I did have a number of years of practice in banking law. So I'm familiar with the banking industry and how the banking industry works and the plumbing behind it. But my education in Bitcoin came really slowly, as I started going down the what we call the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Back in 2017, a friend of mine at work told me about Bitcoin, and he didn't know, he didn't know much about it. The only thing really that he knew is that, number had gone up for him. He got into it like really early. I think his first Bitcoin purchase was when Bitcoin was still going for like $200 a coin. And when he told me about it, it was like, 10 times that, over 10 times. I think my first purchase in 2017, Bitcoin was going for $2,500 a coin. So I was a little skeptical because he told me, "Hey, look, I got it at 200 and you can get it now for 2,500. You should buy in." And I'm like, I don't know, man. For $2,500 seems like a lot of money for some phony internet money. And, at that time, I did not know anything about the fundamentals of Bitcoin or the background of it or the security aspect. The only thing I knew is that it was a new thing called cryptocurrency. And, if you bought in now, you were buying in early and the number would go up. Like I say, my buddy who told me about it, he had 10x'd his money, going from $200 a coin up to, $2,500 a coin. So I threw a little money at it, hoping that maybe I could 10x my money. And you know what? I actually did, because I like I said, I got it at $2,500 a coin, and it wasn't very long before it was going for $25,000 a coin, and now it's going for much more than that. So the number went up for me, and that made me happy, and I started allocating a little bit more to Bitcoin as it started going up. But it was years before I really started to go down, the Bitcoin rabbit hole to figure out what Bitcoin really is and what distinguishes it from other forms of money, from gold and fiat and things like that. I mean, I didn't understand that kind of stuff for years. All I really cared about, I was an investor, because I knew about inflation, right? And I knew enough to know that the last thing you want to do is keep your money in the bank, because if you do, you're getting poorer by something like 7 to 10% a year. So I had always invested in stuff like the stock market, and I had some treasuries and stuff like that. And so when my buddy told me about Bitcoin, I said, well, let me throw a little bit of money at that and see how it goes. And I did. But it was years before I, really got into like I say, the Bitcoin rabbit hole to really try to figure out what Bitcoin really is, and there's a lot to it once you start going down it.
Oh, absolutely. And in this book, you did a great job of going down that rabbit hole, not only of Bitcoin itself, but why Bitcoin might be necessary, right? You talk a lot about finance in general, go through the whole, from the barter system to the implementation of money and use of gold and precious metals, leading us all the way up to this creation of Satoshi back in what 2009. And it's a really interesting read, whether you want to learn about Bitcoin or just money in general. I think you did a really good job of going through that. But you know what, this is your first book from what I understand.
Yeah,
What
it's the only
was
book I've ever written.
right? So what made you decide that writing this book was something you wanted to do? Like what came into making that decision?
So yeah, like I say, I put a little bit of money into Bitcoin because I was hoping that the number would go up for me, but I didn't really understand what it was. I didn't know what I was buying, and so because of that, I didn't really put a whole lot of money into it. I just allocated, just a couple of $100 basically as an experiment to see what would happen. But I'm a very curious guy, and I don't like to invest in things that I don't understand. I mean, before I invested in stocks, I did my due diligence to figure out which equities I wanted to buy, and so I started doing the same thing with Bitcoin, and I just started looking into it. And one of the things you'll find, Paul, if you ever start to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole yourself, is that there's really no end to it. I mean, I've been going down this rabbit hole for going on 10 years now, and even still today, after writing a book even about it, I still learn stuff about Bitcoin almost every day. I mean, it's an endless rabbit hole. The more you want to learn, the more you can, because it can take you down branches of finance and money. And so that's how I started the book, because what I came to understand is that I don't think you can really have an appreciation for what Bitcoin is and for what a phenomenal investment opportunity it is until you really understand money. And most of us don't. In fact, I'd go out on a limb and say almost all of us are really ignorant about money. And I think that's by design, because in my view, money is one of the most important things there is for an adult to know. And it's one of the things that they never teach you about in school. So if you want to learn about what money is, if you want to learn about how the financial system works, you have to teach yourself. They're not going to teach you that in school, not in elementary school, high school, or even college. And I know people who have majored in economics. What they're taught, even in college, what you're taught is the propaganda about the modern monetary theory and how fiat is really a good thing, and the fact that inflation is needed and it's a good thing if we keep it within about 2 or 3%. And all of that is false. I came to figure that out for myself, that all of that is false. So in order to really understand what Bitcoin is, you really have to have a handle on what money is. And I know you read my book, so you know that I don't even really talk about Bitcoin per se until chapter 5, right? The first 4 chapters are about what is money, what does money even mean, and then different kinds of money that humans have used over the years, starting with shells and natural commodities up to gold and fiat. And then once I do, a brief introduction as to all of that, then you have a basis to begin to understand Bitcoin. And that's only after I discuss all of that first do I go into Bitcoin. And like I said, because I think if I just start talking to you about Bitcoin and you don't have an understanding of what money is and what fiat is and what the difference is between currency and money, and the difference between the fiat standard and the gold standard. When I start talking to you about the Bitcoin standard, you're not going to be in a position to really grasp what I'm talking about. So
Right.
that's why I started the book the way I did. And like I said, I don't even really talk about Bitcoin until 4 or 5 chapters into the book already.
Yeah, and I know we had a conversation the other day, and you talked about there's other books available on Bitcoin, and some of them are really lengthy, quality and very informative, but lengthy and a lot to digest. And as I read this book, I got the real sense that you really wanted to go out of your way to break this stuff down as simply and as easy to digest for new people as possible, and I think that's really important for someone who's in the blockchain and the crypto sphere, how difficult it is to get people in, even though there's a lot of people out there who are intrigued by it and interested, just they just don't know where to begin, right? Would you say, how important was it for you going into this, to say, this is something I want to make sure that new people are going to know what's going on because they have, like you said, no background on this whatsoever.
Yeah, and you really touched on one of the reasons that I wanted to write the book, because, like you say, there are lots of Bitcoin books out there, and some very good Bitcoin books. And in fact, as I started getting deeper down the rabbit hole myself, I started reading those books, and I learned a lot from those books. But the difference that my book has from those is, like, for instance, the probably the most popular Bitcoin book is The Bitcoin Standard by Saifuddin Ammous, which is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. I learned a lot about Bitcoin and a lot about money by reading that book. Um, but the one of the things that Saifuddin does in his book that I really did not want to do in my book is he really gets into the underlying academics and the different viewpoints between, for instance, the Austrian school of economics and Keynesianism and modern monetary theory. And I do touch on some of that stuff a little bit in my book, but Saifuddin does kind of like a deep dive into it, which is great if you're interested in learning about that kind of stuff. But I really wrote my book with a particular kind of reader in mind, and the reader that my book is aimed at is the person who wants to know Bitcoin and wants to know if Bitcoin is something that they should, like I did, invest the vast majority of my long-term savings into. So you don't really need to understand the nuances and the intricacies of the Austrian School of Economics versus Keynesianism to really understand that. You do need to understand some of the concepts that the Austrian school is based on, like subjective value theory. What exactly is value? What's it based on? So I do discuss some of that briefly in my book, but basically, in my book, I had a couple of goals in mind. One is I wanted to give the reader everything that they needed to know to be able to answer for themselves the question, why Bitcoin? Why should I put my hard earned money into Bitcoin? And the other goal that I had is I wanted it to be very readable. I wanted it to be a book that you could pick up and read in a day or two, not a book that you. And I'm a slow reader, so it took me like over a week to get through the Bitcoin Standard. And like I say, I didn't mind that because I was curious about all of that stuff, all of the underlying information. But for the person who just wants to know Bitcoin and they just want to pick up a book that they can read in a day or two and really understand everything that they need to know to understand why they should invest in Bitcoin, that's really the direction that I had in mind when I started writing the book. And I told myself from the gate that I wanted to do everything that I could to keep the book at less than 200 pages or less. And I was barely able to do that. I mean, I actually had to actually had to prune a lot of stuff out. And after I finished reading the book, it was after I finished writing the book, it was actually a little longer than I wanted it to be. So I had to go back and like prune some stuff. And I really, the stuff that you really need to know to understand Bitcoin, I left in. But if there's any stuff that you didn't really need to know about Bitcoin, I left it out because I just wanted it to be readable. I didn't want it to be a book that somebody would buy because they were curious about Bitcoin and then get halfway through the book and get frustrated or get bored and put the book down and never finish it. So I really wanted my book to be readable, and I wanted everyone who started the book to finish the book and to understand all the stuff that I talk about in the book. Because as you know, I mean, I do talk about some kind of high level stuff, about the fiat currency system and the debt basis of that, and the how the effect of the national debt has on that, and how the fiat system is structurally designed in such a way that it has to expand. They have to print more money continually. They have to inflate the dollar continually. And in fact, if the dollar is not inflating, the fiat system is going to crash. And I didn't know all of that stuff, until I started researching this book and researching Bitcoin. So I do go into some kind of like high level economic topics, but I do my best to describe it in a way that the average person can get it, and understand what I'm talking about without having to have an economics degree or a degree in computer science. I did my absolute best to basically not dumb it down, because I mean these are concepts that you need to understand, but to describe it in everyday plain language without I tried to use as little jargon and economics lingo as possible. I did my absolute best to just describe this stuff in everyday language, and I'm starting to get the feeling that I did that, because there's been a few reviews of my book, and almost all of them say that, boy, this guy, he really describes all this stuff, and he makes it accessible, and he doesn't dumb it down, and he makes it understandable. And that really is gratifying to me, because that's exactly what I was trying to do. I was trying to, because I'm so passionate about getting this information out there. To be honest with you, I didn't really write this book to make money, to be honest with you. I wrote this book because I think everyone needs to understand this information. And most of us don't. We're not taught about it in school. I didn't learn any of this stuff in school. I didn't even learn any of this stuff from my parents, because they didn't understand it.
Right.
So my goal in writing this book was to explain it, and to explain it in a way that folks can read it, understand it, and get it, and act on it.
So, Michael, you did an awesome job with this book, breaking down Bitcoin, breaking down economics, where it started to where we are now, and where it's going with Bitcoin. But we got a lot of people that are tuning in that don't own Bitcoin, right? Maybe they don't even know how to get Bitcoin or what Bitcoin even is. So I'd love for you to take this opportunity now to maybe give the group a little breakdown, a little rundown of what is Bitcoin, right? How do they get started, and what do they need to know before they actually buy this book and really, dive into the weeds, as they say?
So yeah, Bitcoin can be described a lot of ways. I think probably the easiest, simplest way to describe it is as a currency, right? The U.S. dollar is a currency. The Mexican peso is a currency. The euro, the currency of the European Union, is a currency, and Bitcoin is a currency. The only difference, well, not the only difference, but one of the differences between Bitcoin and other currencies is you can't get it in paper or metal form. It's only in digital form. You can only access it electronically, which is not really that very much different from other currencies these days, because I never carry cash anymore. When I use dollars, it's always through some app. I'm paying with tap to pay on my phone or using a credit card, but I never actually see the cash. And Bitcoin is a lot like that. And there's not, I'll be honest with you, there's not a whole lot of places where you can spend Bitcoin, at least here in the States. There are places in Africa and in El Salvador, which accepts Bitcoin as legal tender. But there are starting to be merchants, even here in the States, where you can actually buy things with Bitcoin. And in fact, I don't know if you heard about it, but Cash App and Block and Square, they are now enabling Bitcoin transactions for merchants. So it's still early days yet, but you can now start to transact in Bitcoin. And so to answer your question, what is Bitcoin? It's just a currency. It's a way to save and spend and transact and transmit value, just like the dollar, just like the euro, and just like any other currency. But one of the reasons that I am so passionate about Bitcoin is the one difference that Bitcoin has from fiat currencies, the peso, the dollar, the euro, is fiat currencies are completely captured and controlled by their governments. And a lot of people may not appreciate what that means or the extent to which the dollar, for instance, is captured and controlled by the United States. But the United States basically has full control over the dollar. They determine how many dollars there are in circulation. They determine the interest rates of the dollar by setting the federal funds rate, which is one of the things that the Federal Reserve Bank does. So everything about the dollar is completely controlled by the government. When they want to raise inflation, they print more dollars. When they want to lower inflation, they'll raise interest rates. I mean, it's basically at their whim. They can control it really in any way that they want, which is not necessarily so bad if you trust the government to do what's in your best interest. But as I started going down this rabbit hole, I started learning that that's not what the government is doing. What they're doing is they are manufacturing inflation for their own benefit. And they tell us they do. I mean, they don't keep it a secret, right? Jerome Powell will tell you that his goal is to keep inflation, at 2%. And they say that all the time on the nightly news. So you come to believe that, well, inflation must not be a bad thing. That's what the Federal Reserve wants to do. That's what our government, that's what their goal is to keep inflation at about 2%. So it must be a good thing. But what they don't tell you is that even at 2% inflation, your dollar is losing about 18% of its purchasing power over 10 years. The other thing they don't tell you about inflation is that even though they talk about this 2% target, they want to keep inflation to around 2%. They almost never hit that target. It's almost always higher than that. And the worst example of that was right after COVID. When everybody got all this helicopter money, everyone was so happy because they were getting all this free money from Joe Biden, and these stimmy checks were just floating around, free money left and right, and everyone was happy about that. Well, I've come to learn that there's no such thing as a free lunch, and that free money that everyone got for their stimmy checks, that money did not come from money that the government had saved up in its savings account. The fact of the matter is that the government has no savings, and it never has had savings, or at least not in decades. In fact, it runs a deficit every single year. So there's no money in the government's bank account. So when they need money to pay for things like the military or Social Security or Medicare, or to give out free money in the form of stimulus checks, where do they get that money? They get it by printing it. They get it at the press of a button. And the worst, money printing that ever happened after COVID, right after COVID, when they were sending out all these stimmy checks that everyone was so happy to get. And as a result of that, Paulie, from 2021, between 2021 and 2022, the inflation rate was nowhere near 2%. It was something like 7.5%. And at 7.5%, your dollar is losing like 50% of its purchasing power over 10 years. So the half-life of your dollar is 10 years, and no one ever tells you that. The government doesn't tell you that. The Federal Reserve Bank doesn't tell you that. The mainstream media does not tell you that. Your schooling doesn't tell you that. Even your parents, most of them don't know. They don't tell you that. But this is what the government is doing to us. And they're doing it in the open, but they don't tell us about it. So they're kind of doing it behind our backs because they are intentionally keeping us ignorant about that. So, Paulie, I'm going to be honest with you, man. Once I learned all that stuff, I got pissed. I got completely angry at the banking system, at the federal bank complex, at the government, at the dollar system, at the entire fiat system, because they're robbing us. What my mother, God love her, my mother's passed on, but she did the very best she could for me. And as I was coming up, she would always tell me, Mickey, that was her nickname for me. Mickey, when do your best in school, get good grades in school. When you get out of school, get yourself a good job. And when you get a job, every dollar that you make, put at least 20 cents of it in the bank. Right. That's what my mother was telling me to do. And she didn't know any better. She thought she was telling me, giving me good advice. But what she didn't know is that every dollar that I put in the bank today, the following year, it's worth 5%, 6%, 7% less. And so you're getting poorer. The more money you keep in the bank, the poorer you're getting every single year. And that value, the other reason I got so really upset about it is that value that you're losing in your bank account. It's not just evaporating into thin air. It's going back to the government, right? Because they've got this $39 trillion debt that they're trying to manage. And the way that they manage, because there's not enough money to pay it back. They don't bring in nearly enough in taxes to pay it back. So the way that they pay it back is two ways. They keep borrowing more money to pay the interest on the debt. And the other way is by inflation, because as they inflate the dollars that they use to pay down the debt are worth less than the dollars that they initially borrowed. So it's like borrowing $100 today and agreeing to pay back $95 next year. And the way they're able to do that is by siphoning off value from savers and using that by inflation. So they're really, the absolute truth of the matter is our government is stealing from us. They're stealing our money to pay down their debts. And once I learned about that, man, that's what caused me to write this book. I had to spread the word. And I did two things immediately. I took all my money out of the bank, and I took most of my money out of my investments in stocks and bonds and things that I have, and I put it into Bitcoin. And the reason I did that is because Bitcoin is the exit from that system. With Bitcoin, the government can't steal from you. They have no access to it. And that's the best thing there is to know about Bitcoin. Yeah, it's great that number goes up, right? I bought it for the first time at $2,500 and it's now trading for like $70,000. That's a beautiful thing. But even better than that for me is the fact that my money is no longer controlled by the government. They cannot inflate my money. They can't access my money. They can't set the interest rate on my money. They can't touch my money. The only person who can touch my money is me. And that's the power that Bitcoin gives you that no other fiat, no other form of money, no other form of currency can give you, and most people focus on Bitcoin because they want to get rich, right?
Right.
Everybody's looking for a Lambo. I put in $1,000 today and in 10 years, I'll have $1 million. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe it won't. I hope it does happen. But that's not the most important thing for me. As I've come to understand more deeply what Bitcoin is, to be honest with you, Paulie, the fiat currency exchange rate, the dollar price of Bitcoin, I've come to understand that is the single least interesting thing there is to know about Bitcoin. And that's the one thing that everyone focuses on. They focus on the charts and they focus on, oh my God, Bitcoin went down because of the Iran war, and now Trump has called a truce. Now Bitcoin is going up. Yippee! Let's dive into it. I've gotten to the point I don't even check the chart anymore. It's completely irrelevant to me. I don't care, because the chart is not going to tell me whether or not I have sovereignty over my money, whether or not the government can steal my money from me through inflation. And that's the power that Bitcoin gives you, is sovereignty over your money, which was never possible before. Before Satoshi invented Bitcoin and before he invented blockchain technology, it was never possible for us to have sovereignty over our money the way that we can have today. And one more thing, I know I've been rambling on for a couple of minutes about this, but just one other thing I want to tell you about sovereignty. So, I now, because the vast majority of my net worth is in Bitcoin, in cold storage Bitcoin, I now have more sovereignty over my wealth than virtually any other nation state. I have more sovereignty over my wealth than Russia, than China, than any other nation state, because no one can touch my money. And that's not true. If you transact in fiat, especially if you transact in dollars, the government can just take it. Example of that is when Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States and the EU and the UK, they just snatched like some $300 billion of Russia's central bank reserves. Why? How were they able to do that? Because Russia did not have sovereignty over its money. Russia's money was in the bank. And if your money is in the bank, it's not your money, right? One of the things that Bitcoiners always say, and is very, very true, not your keys, not your coins. And if you trust your money to a third party, whether that's a bank or an investment brokerage account or any custodian, you don't have control over it. In fact, you don't have money. What you have is a claim on money. You have an IOU for money, and you can go to the bank and you can deposit, $1 million in the bank today. And I guarantee you, if you go back to the bank the next day and ask for your $1 million back, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. And they have the power to deny that to you. They're going to have you jump through all sorts of hoops and fill out all sorts of forms about why you need so much money. And it better be something other than, it's my money, right? It better be something other than that. And they're not going to give it to you because you don't have control over your money. So that's the most beautiful thing about Bitcoin for me, is it gives you power over your own money that was really not possible before the blockchain.
Right. Oh man, I'm so excited. I get to use my first beep. I used to use my first bleep in an episode of the Author Spotlight series. I can't wait. Beep. Oh man, I love the passion. This is the thing about Bitcoin and people who are involved in it. Like, from it as an outsider, you see people like yourself and you see the passion and you're like, man, I really need to. When you see someone who's got the kind of conviction that Bitcoiners have, you can't help but be intrigued and want to learn more. And I think you do it phenomenal. I was telling you the other day when I was reading the first chapter, I was like, man, this guy loves Bitcoin. Holy smokes. But you do a great job through the book of breaking down just why, right? And one of the things I told you, I like picking a quote from the book. I did a last episode with Jason, and there was one quote that stood out to me. It was towards the very end, but I thought really encapsulated a lot of what your message was. And it was this: Bitcoin's strength is not that it cannot be attacked. Its real strength is that it cannot be easily broken, coerced, or corrupted. And that even when attacked, it tends to emerge stronger than before. Whereas the world's fiat currencies, undergirded by a complex system of hidden lies, Bitcoin is the first monetary system built on open truth. And truth, once revealed, is very hard to kill. Ooh, I really like that. I love this idea of truth. I think we live in a time now where people want more than ever truth, transparency. Whether we can handle it or not is a different conversation, but people want it, right? And blockchain offers transparency, and you were very transparent, in even some of the issues you just mentioned. Bitcoin is not perfect. It's faced issues. I'd love to give you a chance real quick, maybe touch on some of those issues, right? And what were those things that popped up? I know you mentioned it in the book, but what were some of the things maybe that popped up that were a challenge, and how did the Bitcoin community deal with that and come out stronger, like you said in that quote?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges that Bitcoin ever faced was early on, and it was the inflation bug. And what people who know about Bitcoin, one of the things is that the supply of Bitcoin is hard capped, meaning that there will never ever be more than 21 million Bitcoin. When the final 21 millionth Bitcoin is mined, some 100 years from now or so, there will never ever be another Bitcoin mined. Once we get to 21 million, that's it. That's all there'll ever be for eternity. And that's one of the things that underlies the value proposition of Bitcoin, because as I was saying earlier about the dollar, one of the terrible things about the dollar is that it's constantly being inflated, which means that the value of your money is constantly going down. The more money they print, the less value your dollars have. The more money that that they inject into the system, the more new money they inject, the more that the dollars that are already in circulation, the more they lose value. And so one of the wonderful things about Bitcoin is that can never happen, because once we get to 21 million coins, that's it. That there will only ever be 21 million coins forever, for eternity, for all 8 billion people on the planet. So that's one of the major financial aspects to Bitcoin. And early on, there was a bug in the protocol. A programmer was able to send a transaction that caused an overflow, and that overflow was accepted by the nodes as a valid transaction. And what that bug did is it created something like 28 billion Bitcoin, which was like thousands of times more than the 21 million hard cap was supposed to be. So that could have killed Bitcoin in its infancy, because it went from a hard cap of 21 million to there being issued immediately like something like, I think it was 28 billion Bitcoin, and that was an emergency. And fortunately, the network was still small enough that the developers were able to find the overflow error and to patch it, and to do a hard fork of the network, and all of the users were able to transfer onto the new fork. And that really, it came very close to killing Bitcoin, and could literally have killed the entire project in its infancy. But thankfully, like I say, the network was small enough, and there were so few users at that time that everyone was able to get on board, do a hard fork, and everyone went down the new fork that ignored the inflation bug and the 28 billion Bitcoin that were on that chain, and go on down to the new chain. And yeah, they fixed it perfectly. The fork went off without a hitch, and Bitcoin carried on. Tick tock, next block, a new block every 10 minutes, and it carried on as if nothing had happened. But the fact of the matter is, something had happened. Something important had happened, and it turned out to be a good thing, because ever since that bug, the Bitcoin developers have become much more circumspect in their development. They're using fuzzing tools, and they're testing it. And anytime there's a change to the network, it goes through lots of rounds of testing, and there's constantly eyes on the network looking for bad codes or bugs or anything like that. So because of that inflation bug, which, like I say, could have killed Bitcoin, it actually ended up making Bitcoin stronger, because the programmers, the testers, the developers, they understand now that what Satoshi did was phenomenal. I mean, the guy's a genius, inventing the blockchain, and inventing the protections and the security protocol that protects the network from attack. I mean, he accomplished a lot and solved a lot of problems. But after that inflation bug, the developers realized that Satoshi was great, but he wasn't perfect, right? He was a very good coder. He was a genius in my view, but he's not a god, and his programming wasn't perfect, and it was subject to attack. And it made the developer community much more vigilant about protecting the network and about making changes to the network. One of the things you'll hear, one of the complaints some people will say about Bitcoin is, well, it's ossified, right? It's a technology that was developed 17 years ago. And since then, there's been all these other blockchains that do a lot of things that Bitcoin can't do, right? Ethereum is much more programmable, and XRP is a lot faster, and all these other blockchains have aspects to them and have functions that they can perform that Bitcoin can't perform. And so some folks who are like fans of other blockchains, they will see that as a negative on Bitcoin. But Bitcoiners don't see it that way. The way we see it is that Bitcoin optimizes for a few things. It optimizes for decentralization. It optimizes for security, and decentralization, security, and those are the two things that it focuses on. There are other blockchains that are a lot more scalable, like Caspa and like I say, Ethereum, much more scalable. They can do a lot more transactions per second. Bitcoin only does something like 7 transactions per second, but it's rock solid. It is by far the most secure computer network ever that's been created, and that is Bitcoin's specialty, being secure and being decentralized. And so, yeah, Vitalik Buterin, the inventor of Ethereum, he came up with what he called the blockchain trilemma. And what he says, and I think he's right about it, is that any blockchain can really only optimize for 2 of 3 things at the same time: scalability, decentralization, or security. So if you're going to optimize for scalability, you're going to suffer decentralization. If you're going to optimize for security, your speed is going to suffer. So there's no perfect solution. Every choice in blockchain design is a matter of trade-offs. Which trade-off do you want to make? Do you want to focus on scalability, or would you rather focus on security, or would you rather focus on decentralization? But the blockchain trilemma basically dictates that you can only pick 2 of the 3. You can't choose all 3. And so Bitcoin, for its part, it chooses security and it chooses decentralization, which means, as a matter of fact, that the scalability is going to suffer. So there's other blockchains that are much faster than Bitcoin. There's other blockchains that are much more programmable and have other features that Bitcoin doesn't have. And there are use cases for those blockchains, right? Like, for instance, my book now on the NFBC, it's on the VE chain, and it's great. It does a great job of doing that, and it has its use case for sure, right? I'm glad that my book is on the blockchain, and it's now an NFT, which I had no idea. I had no plans for that to happen as I was writing the book, but now that it's there, it's been wonderful in a lot of ways, and we can get into that a little bit later. But for your savings, for your life savings, and I have basically the entirety of my life savings is now on the Bitcoin blockchain. So for me, the most important thing for me is the security of my life savings, because if the Bitcoin blockchain breaks, I'm gonna have to go get a job at McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's my life savings. So for me, the most important thing, the most important aspect about Bitcoin is the security and the decentralization, which ensures that no one can capture it and control it the way the centralized fiat currency regime is controlled by the governments and the central banks that control it.
Right. As a Bitcoin guy, you're now on a blockchain with your
Right?
book. You ain't on Bitcoin, but hey, you're on a blockchain. What is that like? What was that experience like, dealing with NFBC, getting this book on here? Like I said earlier, your book's available on multiple platforms, but now being on blockchain, what was that experience like? How does that feel?
Yeah. So years ago, as I'm sure you recall, NFTs were huge, right? People were buying and trading, pictures of apes and all sorts of stuff, and NFTs really took off. I was never interested in any of that because I didn't really see a use case for it in my life, right? I really didn't have any use for a picture of an ape, even if it was non-fungible and could only be owned by me and used by me and moved by me and sold by me. I didn't really get it. I wasn't really interested. But when I met David, one of the founders of NFBC, I was at a book festival out in Tucson, and David came up to my booth. We started talking about Bitcoin, and he started telling me about NFBC. And I guess he was hoping to sell me on the platform and convince me to put my book on the NFBC platform. And I didn't let him get like 5 minutes into his spiel before I just saw, the light, went on for me. And I just saw that, oh yeah, this is perfect. This is going to be a perfect mirror. My book is going to be great for NFBC, and NFBC is going to be great for me, because I had no idea before that conversation with David. I had no idea that it was even possible, for me to turn my book into an NFT, right? That I could put it on a blockchain and control it. And I never thought about that before. But as soon as David started explaining it to me, I mean, the use case just popped out at me because now, as you say, my book is now available on NFBC. And for the readers who have bought my book through NFBC, they have just like Bitcoin, I was saying earlier, gives you complete sovereignty over your money. Well, the fact of the matter is that NFBC gives you complete sovereignty over your audiobook experience because you can buy the book once you've minted it onto the blockchain, it's yours and you can do with it whatever you want. You can read it, you can give it away, you can loan it, you can sell it to someone else. And that's never, if you've ever, used these other audiobook platforms, like there's a bunch of them out there. There's Audible and Google Play and Apple Books. There's a bunch of them. But they're like, I liken them to the fiat currency system, right? Because it's a captured and completely controlled system. If you download a book to Audible, you can read it, right? As many times as you want, but that's all you can do with it. You can't sell it. You can't trade it back in. You can't loan it to a friend. You can't give it away. You can't do anything with it. The only thing you can do with a book that you've downloaded to Audible is download it to your phone and hand your phone to somebody and let them listen to your book on your phone. But you better hope they don't run off with your phone, right? With NFBC, my book is yours. In fact, it's no longer my book, it's yours. You buy it, you can do whatever you want with it. You can burn it, you can give it away, you can delete it, you can sell it, you can trade it, you can do whatever you want with it. It gives you full, complete control over your book. And for a Bitcoin guy, especially a Bitcoin guy like me who doesn't really care about the number go up aspect of Bitcoin, what I'm excited about and what I'm so passionate about with regard to Bitcoin is the sovereignty, the complete control that Bitcoin gives me over my life savings. And now that same sovereignty, that same control is available for audiobooks, which has never been available before. So I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's a fantastic business model, and I'm so thrilled to be a part of it. Like I say, I think my book is it's already sold. I've been on NFBC for just a few weeks. I've already sold like 30 copies already. My very first day on NFBC, I sold more books my first day on NFBC than I sold my entire first month on Amazon. I mean, it's just been fantastic. So it's been a win-win, man. It's been great for me. It's been great for my book, and I think it's been great for NFBC as well. So I'm happy to be here talking with you about it. I'm very passionate, as you can see, about Bitcoin, but I'm also very passionate about NFBC. I think it's great what those guys are doing. I'm just thrilled to be a part of it. So I'm looking forward to a very long, very mutually beneficial relationship between Satoshi's Gift and the Non-Fungible Book Club for sure.
Do want to start wrapping this down. It's been great. We don't want to give away too much because we want people to go and read the book. It's an easy to digest when it's less than 5 hours. And like Michael said earlier, the first handful of chapters is really dedicated to explaining money and all the stuff leading up to where we are now with, leading up to the financial crisis. And like you mentioned, the COVID. And I mean, right now we're watching, the government constantly try to double their budget every year just to keep up with it. Like when we think about the system we have now, how do you see Bitcoin being able to change that future to a better alternative than what we've been dealing with to this point?
Yeah, so as you know, the subtitle of the book, the title of the book is Satoshi's Gift. The subtitle is The Past, Present, and Future of Bitcoin. And as you know, you've listened to the book. So toward the end of the book, I do actually discuss, what I foresee for the financial future of the world in terms of fiat currency and how that is going to be potentially affected by Bitcoin. And I'm going to be honest with you. One of the reasons I felt so passionate and just had an urgency about writing this book is because I've come to realize that we are really at the very beginning of what is going to be a monumental shift in the global economic order of things. Things that have been in place for all of my lifetime, all of your lifetime, they're changing now. They're starting to crumble. The faith in the dollar is beginning to crumble. The dollar is the global reserve currency. It's the asset that central banks around the world, all nations around the world, they hold dollar or dollar denominated debt, treasury bills. And the dollar has really been the rock solid base of the global economy. And that trust, because everyone trusts the dollar, everyone trusts the United States economy and the deep, very liquid United States capital markets. But that trust is beginning to erode, and central banks around the world are starting to de-dollarize. In fact, you're even starting to hear that term in the mainstream media these days, de-dollarization, meaning that other nations are looking for ways to conduct their international trade in a media of exchange other than the U.S. dollar, and central banks around the world are reducing their dollar denominated holdings and turning to things like gold and other currencies. So we're really at it's still early days yet for this shift, but the shift is starting, and it's going to be a monumental shift in the way things are done around the world. And part of that is going to be Bitcoin. And you can even start to see it now if you pay attention to it the way I do. Almost daily, there are accounts in the news of different institutions that are allocating to Bitcoin. In fact, I just saw in the news today that Morgan Stanley is now going to start offering a Bitcoin ETF. And as you may know, banks for years ignored Bitcoin. They ridiculed Bitcoin. They attacked Bitcoin. And now they're giving up, right? They're turning to Bitcoin. They're beginning to provide Bitcoin-backed services, and they will eventually be offering Bitcoin-backed lending and Bitcoin custody solutions. They're already turning to Bitcoin ETFs. And for me, that's probably the single most important metric you can look at to see whether or not we're really starting down this path that I describe as, a monumental shift in the economic order of things. When the banks start offering Bitcoin, because banks don't deal in anything. They don't deal in gold. They don't deal in silver. They don't deal in commodities. They don't deal in oil. They deal in fiat currency. And now they're dealing in Bitcoin. And when you see the banks start to do that, I got to let you know that, a lot of Bitcoiners will say that, Bitcoin will be adopted gradually and then suddenly. Well, I think it's safe to say that gradually is over and suddenly is now beginning. So, and that's one of the reasons I felt such an urgent need to write my book, because I think now is the time. If you don't know much about Bitcoin, if you haven't educated yourself about Bitcoin, if you have not allocated any of your savings into Bitcoin, today is the day to do that. Today is the day to start understanding Bitcoin, to start looking into Bitcoin, because the world is going there. The banks are going there. The large institutions, Wall Street is going there, and even some nations are going there. El Salvador, now accepts Bitcoin as legal tender. They're the first nation to do that, but they won't be the last. Most people have heard about MicroStrategy, the Bitcoin treasury company that used to be a software company. Now their business is only focused on one thing, and that's accumulating as much Bitcoin as possible. And it's crazy because the first purchase that they did of Bitcoin was with their reserves, right? They had cash on hand. I think it was something like $250 million they had on cash on hand, and they put it all into Bitcoin. And since then, they've been basically out of money, but they have not slowed down. They're buying more and more and more Bitcoin all the time because they're raising money by selling equity, by selling shares. in the company and by offering credit, Bitcoin backed credit, and it's growing all the time. And MicroStrategy was the first, but they're now not the only. There are other publicly traded corporations that are now becoming Bitcoin treasury corporations. So the gradually phase is over. The suddenly phase is beginning, and take MicroStrategy as your clue, right? Because it has one goal. MicroStrategy has one goal in life, and that is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as humanly possible. MicroStrategy now has over 700,000 Bitcoin, and there's only ever going to be 21 million. So they have now over like 3% of the entire eternal supply of Bitcoin, and they're not the only ones that are doing this. So there's already not enough Bitcoin to go around for everybody on the planet to have one whole Bitcoin, right? There's 8 billion with a B people on the planet. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. So there's only enough for everybody to get like less than 0.2%, of one Bitcoin, right? And so if you're sitting around, ignoring Bitcoin, not paying attention to Bitcoin, what you're doing is you're letting all these institutions, these corporations, these governments get it all. Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy, he doesn't need Bitcoin. He's already a billionaire. Elon Musk, he doesn't need Bitcoin. He's on his way to being a trillionaire. But the people, the working class, the wage earners, folks like you and me at basically the bottom of the economy, we're the ones who are hurt the worst by keeping our money in the bank. And Bitcoin is sitting there as a life preserver for you. You can exit that thieving fiat system and pivot to Bitcoin, just like MicroStrategy did, and you can save yourself from being debased. You can save your savings from being inflated away, and Bitcoin allows you to do that. And if you have not learned about Bitcoin yet, if you don't know about Bitcoin yet, you don't have to read my book. There's a lot of information out there. There's lots of really good Bitcoin books out there. I've already mentioned The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. It's a great book. The Big Print by Lawrence Lepard is a great book. Broken Money by Lynn Alden. These are all great books, and there's others that are out there. So you don't have to read mine, but you need to learn, because your life, your future life, your savings, your family, your children, your descendants, it depends on this. And I know that sounds hyperbolic. I know that sounds like, I'm Chicken Little screaming about the sky falling. But call me crazy if you want. But brother, the sky is falling. It may not fall tomorrow. It may not fall next year. But if the government keeps running their money the way they run it, by increasing the national debt constantly, it's 39 trillion today. It'll be 40 trillion next year. In 10 years, it'll be 50 trillion. And it never goes down. The national debt structurally cannot go down. They cannot pay it off. It only goes one way. That means it goes up, which means they have to print more money constantly, continually. And as they print more money, the money that you have in the bank gets worth less and less and less and less every single year. So if you're wondering why you're struggling, to put gas in your car, why you're struggling to buy groceries, why you're struggling to pay rent, why does it seem that everything is going up in price? Well, the fact of the matter is you're looking at it the wrong way. Things are not going up in price. What's happening is the value of your dollar is going down. That's what inflation is. And that's not going to stop. That will never, ever, ever stop. So the longer you hold on to fiat currency, the longer you keep money in the bank, the poorer you're going to get, the poorer you're going to be. It's almost impossible to get rich in that system. And Bitcoin is your exit. Bitcoin is the escape hatch. And I'm doing everything I can to spread the word to as many people as possible, because now is the time. And I know, Paulie, you've told me that you don't have any Bitcoin yet. You've now read the book, right? You understand what Bitcoin is. You understand what's at stake. So, and I know you want to wrap this up, and I'm almost done, but I just want to say one last thing.
Yeah, you're good.
just want to say one last thing. A lot of people are turned off by Bitcoin or scared away from Bitcoin because they hear that it's now going for $70,000 for a coin, right? But the thing is, you don't have to buy a whole coin, right? Whatever money that you have, you can put that into Bitcoin. You can literally buy $10 worth of Bitcoin, right? $20 worth of Bitcoin. Everyone has a spare $10 that they can put into Bitcoin, right? If it means, eating out once less per week, right? Or going out to the movies, once a month instead of 2 or 3 times a month. Everyone can put away $10, right? Everyone can put away $10 a month, and most of us can put away a lot more than that, right? If we really hunker down and we understand that our fiat savings are being inflated away and turning to dust, and Bitcoin is the escape hatch. If you get that, you can do what I do. You can do what MicroStrategy did and pivot and put all of your money into Bitcoin. Now, listen, I'm not, this is not financial advice. And I'm not telling you to put all of your money into Bitcoin, because one of the things you have to do is learn Bitcoin, right? It's not all, daisies and butterflies with Bitcoin, because one of the downsides of Bitcoin is that it's very volatile, right? Just a few months ago, Bitcoin was at an all-time high of like $126,000 per coin.
Yeah.
Since then, it's crashed and it's come down now all the way to like $70,000 per coin. And a lot of people who don't deeply understand what Bitcoin is, they got shaken out of the market, right? If you bought at $126,000 and then it crashed to $70,000, it's really hard to hold on to that investment, right?
Yeah.
Unless you know what you hold. Me, I bought Bitcoin at literally every price over the past 5 years, from $2,500 to $5,000 to $10,000 to $20,000 to $100,000 and I was buying at $126,000. I buy Bitcoin every single week, nonstop.
Wow.
I bought Bitcoin at $126,000. And yeah, I felt some kind of way when it started crashing down to 90, 80, 70, 60. It went all the way down to $60,000 a coin. And I'm not going to lie to you, I felt some kind of way about that, but I understand Bitcoin. I know what I have. So rather than letting the price crash shake me out of the market, I took the exact opposite route. I started buying like crazy. My bank account right now is empty. I'm like overdrawn because I have no dollars left to buy Bitcoin with. When it went down to like $60,000, I was literally scraping every dollar together I could to buy this, because I know it's not going to stay down there. It's going to go back to $126,000, and then it's going to go to $200,000 and $300,000 and $500,000 and eventually $1 million a coin. And do you think when Bitcoin is trading for $1 million a coin, do you think I'm going to care that at one point in time I bought it for $126,000 and it crashed to $60,000? I'm going to be around when Bitcoin is crashing from $1 million to $500,000, and I'll still be buying it, right?
Yeah.
At $500,000. So because I understand.
All right, Michael. All right, Michael, you sold me. You got me. All right.
Get yourself some Bitcoin, bro.
I got
Get
the
yourself
book
some
and
Bitcoin.
listen to this. I gotta go get some Bitcoin now. All right. You got me. This guy's good. Man, Michael, this has been incredible. You're pitching it well. And I guess the last thing I'd like to ask is, if people want to follow your advice and they want to get into Bitcoin, where should they begin? Besides, of course, buying your book and listening to that. What would you recommend to people who are looking to get into Bitcoin and don't know where to start? What would you recommend?
So what I used to do when I first really understood Bitcoin pretty deeply is I would literally grab everyone, right? Friends, family, sometimes even strangers on the street. I literally grab them by the collar and say, stop what you're doing and just buy as much Bitcoin as you can possibly get and do it right now. I don't do that anymore because some of my good friends actually took that advice. And when the price of Bitcoin went up, they got all happy and they patted me on the back and said, thanks so much for the great advice. And then when the price of Bitcoin crashed, they got nervous, they got shaken out of the market, and they sold at a loss. So I never do that anymore. I don't tell anybody buy Bitcoin. What I do now is I say learn Bitcoin. Understand Bitcoin, understand what it really is. And my book is a very good place to start. But like I say, there are other books out there. But understand Bitcoin and only allocate to it. And I'll tell this to you, Paulie. I'll give you this advice directly to you. I recommend that you allocate to Bitcoin only as much as you have conviction about Bitcoin, right? After reading my book, after this conversation with me today, you have some conviction about Bitcoin. Your conviction is not as deep and not as strong as mine. So don't do like me. Don't put the entirety of your net worth into Bitcoin, because believe me, if it goes back up to $126,000 and then crashes again to $60,000, you're going to be very tempted to sell, right? So don't put your entire net worth into Bitcoin. Learn Bitcoin, understand Bitcoin, buy a little bit of Bitcoin and watch it. And as your
Right.
conviction grows, as your understanding grows, allocate a little bit more. There's no rush, especially for you. I'm 63 years old, man. So I got, what, max 20, 30 years, to let Bitcoin do what it's going to do for me. You're a young man, you got 40 years easy, 50 maybe,
Well,
to
if I'm lucky.
let Bitcoin do what it's going to do, man. And then you put, money into Bitcoin now at your age. By the time you're my age, man, you are going to be set. You're not going to care about inflation. You're not going to care about what the dollar is doing. You're not going to care about what the Federal Reserve doing. You're not going to care. And listen, I have sympathy for everyone about these wars and where innocent people are dying. I have sympathy for that. But I'm going to be honest with you. In terms of how it affects me and my finances, doesn't matter, right? If they open the Strait of Hormuz, great. If they keep it closed forever, great. It's not going to affect my Bitcoin. In fact, if anything, it's going to make the dollar price of my Bitcoin go up. And that is a wonderful feeling to have, to not be, depending upon the government,
Right.
and our administration, and for them to do the right things and to do the smart thing, and for the Federal Reserve Bank to do what's good for the people. Because I'll give you this, they're not. The Federal Reserve Bank does not care about you, doesn't
No.
care about me. They care about two things. They care about the government being able to service its debt, and they also care about the banks. And not all of the banks. They care about the big banks, the banks that are too big to fail. They care about that. Your government doesn't care about you. And the central banks certainly don't care about you. And the commercial banks really don't care about you. So why would you care about them? Why would you trust them for your financial health? Right? Because if your money is in dollars, you are trusting the very institutions that profit from the debasement of your savings. You're trusting the banks. You're trusting the Federal Reserve Bank. You're trusting the government. All of these institutions, they profit from your impoverishment. And that's who you're trusting. And Bitcoin, like I've said a couple of times already, Bitcoin is the exit from that. With Bitcoin, you don't have to trust anyone. You don't have to trust any institution. You don't have to trust any organization. All you have to do is trust the immutable blockchain. And you really don't even have to trust that, because you can verify, right? You can't verify the funds that are held in your bank. You can't verify what the central bank is doing, but anyone with a node, anyone who runs a Bitcoin node can verify for themselves what's going on the blockchain, where what your coins are, and that they're connected to your address, and the fact that there's not more than 21 million Bitcoin, and that there is no inflation bug. You can verify this for yourself. Now, I'll guarantee you this: Bitcoin ain't going to zero. And how can I guarantee you that? Because if Bitcoin goes to zero, I'm buying it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot more people who feel that way about Bitcoin than just me. So there's no chance that Bitcoin is going to zero. Yeah, it's very volatile. It went up to 126, it went down to 60. It's now at 70. It's very volatile. So just invest enough money into Bitcoin that if it does go to zero, it won't
Right.
ruin your life, right? It won't kill your
And
day.
Bitcoin has shown to be incredibly resilient. And I think a lot of people, the list of people's growing that sees Bitcoin as the future. And I think a lot of them, hopefully, in the future, will get it from reading your book, Satoshi's Gift: The Past, Present, and Future of Bitcoin. Michael Hollomon Jr., I really appreciate you for joining me here, my friend. It's been a great conversation. Really encourage everyone to go to nfbclub.com now. Get your copy of his book. It's only, I think, $15 or something.
Yeah.
Super inexpensive. And of course, if you like what's in there, you got a bunch of other much more technical, long-winded Bitcoin books you can get into to get in the weeds. But Michael, really love your book, man. It's a great head start. I'm gonna go buy some Bitcoin right now. I'm gonna go do it. All right.
My man.
But as I wrap this up, want to give you a chance to give your final thoughts as we close this thing out and wrap up episode 3 of the Author Spotlight series, brought to you by Non-Fungible Book Club.
Well, Paulie, like I said, I just want to really thank you. I'm very grateful to NFBC for what they're doing for me and for my book and getting the word out there. Those guys have really been great about spreading the word on X and to their followers and their community. Like I say, the response for the book has been fantastic, much more so than even I expected. Like I say, I sold more copies on NFBC in one day than I did in Amazon in the first month. So I'm just really grateful for that. And I'm grateful to have a platform to just spread this information, because like I say, my goal is not to make a few bucks. My goal is to get this information out there so that folks like you and me, man, everyday hardworking guys, we can take advantage of these same things that these billionaires like Michael Saylor, like the BlackRocks of the world, like Morgan Stanley Bank, like the banks of the world, they're getting into this, man. And it's time for us to do that as well, because we do not want to be left behind, because and we didn't really have, a chance to go into it very deeply, but the entire economy, the entire global economy is changing. And it's going from the fiat regime of the old, century. We're now in a digital world, right? Everything is digital. So it makes sense. Our communications are digital. Our transactions are digital. Our news is digital. Our social networks are even our social networks, right? Our friends are digital. I have more friends on X that I've never met in real life than I've ever met in real life, right? So our social networks are digital. It only makes sense, right, that our economy will go digital as well. And it's doing that, and it's doing it now. So now is the time. Don't wait till tomorrow. Get my book today, read it today, and buy some Bitcoin tomorrow. That's my message. Get it now. Get it now, because there's never going to be a better time than right now. So,
oh, Michael, I couldn't have said it better myself, my friend. And I'm super happy for you with how many books you've sold. But I'm thinking we're going to sell a bunch more after this launches. Because come on, people, how could you not want to read more from this man after you hear the passion and the knowledge? Michael, this has been an absolute pleasure, dude. I really appreciate you. Look forward to maybe talking again in one of these down the road. Who knows? Maybe get the itch to write another book. Who knows? We'll see.
Nah, I'm done, man. Bitcoin is the only thing. It's really the only thing that I've ever felt passionate enough to actually write a book about, because writing a book is not easy, right? And I'm a lawyer, so I research and I write that's all I do all day long is I write letters, I write pleadings, I write emails, I write correspondence, I write all day long. But I've never had the desire to write a book before about anything. But I'm just so thoroughly passionate about Bitcoin that once I had all this information, once all these pieces came together for me, I had no choice, right? I just had to do this. I had to share this information, because there's so much information, and it's not very widely known. Again, the stuff that's in my book is not stuff you're going to learn in school. It's not stuff you're going to learn from your friends. It's not stuff you're even going to learn from your parents. This is stuff that you're only going to learn one of two ways: getting a book like mine and reading it, or doing the thousands of hours of research that I did to learn it for yourself. Right? So do it the easy way. Get the book.
Yeah, I'll take the under 5 hours listen to your book for sure. That's the way I'm going, Michael. Appreciate you, my friend. Good luck moving forward, and we will talk to you again soon, my friend.
All right, Paulie. Appreciate it, man. You have a great day.
There you have it, folks. Episode 3 of the Author Spotlight series is in the books. I got to tell you, I'm really enjoying these episodes so far. And Michael, absolute pleasure to get to meet him and talk as we just did. His book, fantastic. Be sure to go to nfbclub.com. Get your copy of Satoshi's Gift. the past, present, and future of Bitcoin, get yourself started on this journey into Bitcoin. I mean, like he said, get yourself $10, get $20, but get this book, learn more, learn a little bit, not only about Bitcoin, but about finances in general. You'll definitely learn a lot. Thank you guys so much for joining. I look forward to seeing you guys back here for episode 4 of the Author Spotlight series, brought to you by Non-Fungible Book Club. Take care. We'll see you guys later. Head on over to www.nfbclub.com and get a copy of today's author's audiobook, as well as many other titles at Non-Fungible Book Club.